It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Vishal Sunak, co-founder and CEO of LinkSquares. LinkSquares is the company behind the fastest growing AI-powered contracting platform for legal teams. Named among the 2020 Gartner Cool Vendors for contract lifecycle management and advanced contract analytics, LinkSquares is used by more than 700 legal teams at mid to large companies, including brands such as TGI Fridays, Cogito, and Wayfair, to move their businesses forward faster. Vishal is widely recognized as a change agent in the legal tech space, where he has worked tirelessly to improve outcomes for legal teams while elevating their visibility within the enterprise. In 2021, Vishal was named an Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year, one of the preeminent competitive business awards for entrepreneurs and leaders of high-tech growth companies. LinkSquares debuted on the Inc. 5000 in 2021 at position 253. Outside of LinkSquares, Vishal mentors local business-based startup founders, plays covers in the blues on his guitar, and spends time adventuring with his wife and 2 young children. He has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Northeastern University and a Master's from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Vishal Sunak, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, Brant, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here today. And gosh, it's been a couple of months since we've spoken, so happy that we could carve out some time together. And we always like to kind of start the podcast understanding a little bit about kind of our foundational beginnings of our CEO guests. And tell us a little bit about what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I was born in Brazil, actually. We're Indian, but my parents were living there. My dad was working there as a professor of electrical engineering. So we moved to America in 1985. I've
Cool.
spent all but 1 year of my life here in America. We moved to Rhode Island. My dad's older sister had moved to Rhode Island kind of randomly, and my dad said, let's grow up with the kids next to family, and that's what we did. So my older sister and I grew up together with my parents in southern Rhode Island, not the most diverse place to live, but looking around and not seeing a lot of people that look like yourself. So
Right.
that was my kind of early foundation. Did high school there, and then went to Northeastern University and studied computer engineering. So apples and trees, I guess, with fathers and sons. So
Right.
my
Not
dad
too
is
far.
my dad is an electrical engineer and PhD, and so living with that was hard because he's like super smart. And then
Oh, was he a professor at Brown or was he a professor at Brown or what?
University of Rhode Island,
University of
University
Rhode
of Rhode
Island.
Island, yeah.
And did your mom worked as well, or did she focus on bringing up your sister and yourself?
Part of my entrepreneurial journey is that my dad started a company when I was a kid
Oh, cool.
to
What was
build
that?
this like new type of fiber amplifier for laser communication. So I saw him start this
Wow.
company literally in our basement with one of his graduate students, and grew this company to like 250 people. And so I kind of grew up
Jeez.
seeing my dad scale like a company like pretty large, and growing up and looking at his early logo designs and prototypes, and going to visit him in his office, and going to see kind of their fabrication because they're a hardware company, right?
Yeah.
Going to see his like fabrication area, and kind of seeing what it took to kind of get a company off the ground, which was so cool when I was a kid.
Right.
And then
Right.
that kind of led me to wanting to go to Northeastern for my undergrad and study engineering also. And since I was a kid, I was kind of drawn into those sort of, tinkering and Legos
Right.
and erector sets and building model rockets and building those sort of things. And
Were you a good student in school?
high school, I was kind of a slacker, to be honest with you. It feels funny to say now, but
You
my
probably
my
weren't
older
challenged, I
sister,
imagine. Huh.
probably the opposite. I probably wasn't motivated enough. My older sister's a real smarty pants. She's a doctor of pharmacy, so
Okay.
I grew up living in her shadow,
In
and
her
and then
footsteps. Right. Right.
and then when I got to Northeastern, I was able to flourish on my own and do quite well in undergrad and kind of set my career up. And so so Northeastern in Boston, and then I moved further north. I got a job. My first job out of college was working in the defense industry, building military hardware.
What degree did you get at Northeastern? What?
Yeah,
Okay.
computer engineering. So little hardware engineering, computer science, which is cool. I kind of liked both, so I decided not to choose between one or the other, which I was actually really appreciative of. It was great. I got to do both, kind of like hardware engineering and coding. Uh, and then my first job out of college, it was just building electronics for the military, which was like super cool and just like learning how to build things, like learning how to schedule things, learning how to
Yeah.
think about requirements and analysis and how things have to work and work together. And it was great.
Did you move down to the DC area
No, in New Hampshire.
in New Hampshire? Okay.
Yeah, in New Hampshire, BAE Systems. So I worked there, kept moving further north, Brant. So, Rhode Island and then Massachusetts and then New Hampshire, if you know it, New England
I was gonna say that's
geographically.
a little antipodal for a kid from, originally India origins in Brazil, right? I mean, if going into colder weather.
Just well, hey, I'm a lifelong New Englander, so I like the snow, so
Uh,
that's fine.
yeah.
And then the ride in the defense industry kind of, eventually made its end for me as there were lots of cuts in the DoD budgets
Mm,
like back then in 2012, and I said to myself, well, either I'm going to stay here the rest of my life, or I'm going to go on another adventure and go try
right.
something else. So I quit my job without really a plan. And Indian parents love that when you quit your job without a plan, because so
Oh
much of your
yeah.
childhood
But they're
emphasis is about your education and the job that you will get. And
sure.
then I found this thing in Boston called Boston Startup School, and it was like a free
Oh,
like finishing program. It was like 6 7 weeks. So I did that program and then got introduced to the founder of Backupify, which is where I started my career in B2B software and really learned the SaaS game from a bunch of experts. Like many great experts have taught me how to do the job I'm doing now, and super thankful for all the mentorship that I've received. And it started there at Backupify, and the idea for LinkSquares came from there too. So
well,
yeah,
at
that's my
Backupify,
that
did you come in a technical role, or were you in management already, or what? Tell us about those first jobs there.
when I was working in the defense industry, I wasn't doing like hardware development or computer coding, software coding, or anything like that. I ended up doing this thing which I really loved, which was like systems engineering. So it's
Mm,
kind of like managing the kind of technical build of products, right? And that is what now we know as like product management, right?
right.
But they call it systems engineering in the defense industry. And so I was kind of drawn to that, thinking about the kind of multidiscipline approach to like building a product. Like, well, how much will it cost, and how reliable will it be, and how do we integrate
Sure.
it into another platform, and what's the kind of long-term ownership costs of building a piece of hardware, and the military is going to use it for 30 years or whatever. And so I kind of got a similar job at Backupify in kind of more operations, which it was pitched as like my engineers aren't kind of business savvy enough to maybe potentially help with data and getting data from different systems. And I had like a strong background in that and kind of made my role in operations. And that's kind of what I did for many years. Marketing operations, revenue operations,
Yeah.
business intelligence, and SaaS metrics, and kind of doing that for the company internally as we started to grow quite fast there in the years that I spent at Backupify all the way to the point where it got acquired.
Were you managing people from day one at Backupify?
No, when I joined, there was only like 30 people, so like the
Right.
organization was like pretty flat. As we kind of grew the company up, then I had the responsibility to like work with a lot of other people and kind of be like an internal resource, like a consultant resource to help. Like, I don't know, weird odd projects. That's what I used to call it. I was the odd projects guy. You need an odd project. I would do it. I would also like help with procurement and buying and evaluating technology for the sales and marketing team. So it was an awesome job. It's like one of the best
Yeah.
jobs I've had. Just lots of learning. And then just to round out my personal journey. Now I live just north of Boston. I have a wonderful wife and two beautiful daughters. So one is almost 4 and one is almost a half-year old. So that's Vishal.
Cool. Cool. Great. So back to Backupify, that was actually acquired. And did you leave there, in a management role then, or trying to get to the point when you started, kind of developing people and working with them? Was it there, or actually after you moved on to LinkSquares and got that set up?
Yeah, so stayed on with Datto, the company that acquired Backupify for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Had a few folks working underneath me then, kind of understanding how to motivate people and create great teams and keep them moving in the right direction. I had done a whole bunch of that sort of work in the defense industry too, just working and supporting large kind of multifunctional teams too, in like program engineering is what they called it in the defense industry, which is
Right.
basically the management of a whole project, right? A whole program inside the military. And yeah, and then my journey at Datto kind of lasted a year, and then I actually went to another company, Insight Square, and then I spent time being director of RevOps there for a little bit of time. But then the company LinkSquares that we had founded then was kind of getting more and more traction. I wanted to devote more time to it, so I quit my job without a plan again a second time, and I in January of 2016 went full time with my co-founder Chris, and we kind of never looked back since then.
Awesome. Mom and dad a little more supportive the second time around?
Well, equally the same. Like, so you're quitting your job without a plan, and is this company gonna go somewhere? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think so. My dad was our first angel investor, gave us 25 grand. So
Great. Great.
appreciative of that. We spent it a long time ago, so maybe in like a couple weeks since when he wired it. So yeah, no, we've had a lot of. What's really great about the journey is we've had a lot of awesome people support us and believe in
Yeah.
what we eventually kind of got to now, which is like a company doing great things and have super happy customers and continue to find more and then get a lot of other people to come join us.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the foundational, kind of structure or the impetus around LinkSquares. What was the customer need that you saw that led you to found the company?
Yeah, we were at Backupify and during a kind of merger and acquisition, an M&A transaction, the company that's going to buy another company, they have lots of questions and you have to generate a lot of answers for them so they have confidence in the deal or they're transitioning into the integration of the two companies is kind of like the next step. And so Datto had asked Backupify what was in all the customer contracts that we had and what we'd agreed to, specifically around we were a backup company and Datto is also a backup company. So they were backing up data in the cloud and we were backing up data in the cloud, but they used their own cloud, right? They had paid for
Mm,
their own data center. They own their own hardware. We used AWS because we were like a scrappy small startup and
right, right.
using AWS makes a ton of sense when you can't buy a football field size warehouse in the middle of nowhere to run a data center, right?
You
So
rent
one
instead.
of the yeah, exactly, you rent virtually, right? And so
Yeah.
one of the priorities for Datto was to start cutting our AWS bill. We were backing up Google Suite, right? So corporate Gmail and Drive and Sheets and Docs and all the data that lives on Google Suite, right? Google Workspace, whatever they call it now. And it was like petabytes. like 3, 4, 5 petabytes of data we
Wow.
were backing up every day. It's expensive, right? And so it was a
Yeah.
cost cutting measure for Datto, who had bought Backupify, to say, well, we want to start moving all your customers off AWS and start reducing your AWS bill. But in order to know that answer, whose data can we move without their permission? You need to know what's inside the contract, right?
Right.
But knowing what's inside the contract is actually really hard because we had thousands and thousands of customers that we were backing up their Google Suite accounts, their corporate Google Suite accounts. And we had worked with large brands like Logitech and Financial Times and Whirlpool, and the contract itself was different, right? Every contract was almost different, right? You had third party paper, which is like big companies make you use their contracts. They'll never sign your terms of service or
Right.
agreement because they're a big company, you're a small company, and they have that advantage. And then we had also negotiated our own terms of service to get deals done, right? To get revenue in the door. And so the answer to that question was like largely impossible to generate for them.
Yeah.
And this was one of the odd projects that had fallen on my plate. And I was just dedicating all my time to the acquisition support and whatever the team needed. And it was kind of quickly realized that we were so disorganized. The contracts were everywhere. They were all in different systems like Salesforce and Google Drive and attached to emails that we had sent to our controller, and some were printed out in a filing cabinet. We lacked a repository. So that was kind of like one thing that may have been also our own immaturity, right? The second thing is most of them were scanned PDFs. So they were printed out, signed by hand, put on a scanner, turned into an image, then turned into a PDF. And so scanned PDFs, you can't control F search them, right? The text is not there. It's actually an image, right? So that creates a challenge because the only way to really read it is to read it yourself, scroll down through it, page after page, looking for a word or a phrase or a paragraph or a sentence. And so that was the real challenge that we had, and we saw, and it was kind of like a light bulb moment that my co-founder, Chris, who also worked at Backupify, we kind of saw it and heard it and felt it kind of first time. And we're like, this is really interesting. Like, why do we not know this answer? And through kind of more exploration, we kind of figured out that in bigger companies, they have someone who's responsible for contracts. We didn't have this role. We didn't have an in-house legal team. We didn't have a general counsel, right? This
or
kind
even
of
a contract
fell into
administrator. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we didn't have any of that, right? And that was probably one of the reasons why we were like slightly disorganized, which was that we didn't have anyone who was in charge. And if no one owns it, I guess no one's going to do anything about it to optimize it. Enough people nudged us towards like, hey, general counsel, you should check it out. I asked my co-founder, do you know any general counsels? And he goes, I know zero. And I said, well, I know zero also. So what did we do? We bought 25,000 emails from a really nice guy in Pakistan, I think, who mined them off LinkedIn. So we gave him like, hey, we want companies that look like Backupify, right? Like venture backed in tech, not too large, like get us the emails of the general counsels and their names. And that's what I had learned in my journey, that like cold email outbound is like really effective as a strategy. I've seen it work everywhere I've worked. And we just started cold emailing general counsels. Hey, I'm Vishal. You don't know who I am. I worked at a company that looks just like yours. We have this contracts problem. Do you have it? You want to chat? And hand raises. People started replying like, yeah, this sounds interesting. Let's chat. And
you get 50, 60% open rates and 35% response rates, and you think you're onto something, right?
Yeah, we were like high-fiving, like, we did it, man. We think we found something. And man, how far away we were from actually knowing that we had found something. And how much work it took thereafter. The customer discovery part is so important, especially starting from scratch, is you really have to know with lots of data, like, don't be in a rush to build software. And we weren't. And there was a long year. Yeah, more than a year of just, we tried to interview 100 general counsels. Like, if we could interview 100 general counsels, we would really know. And at the end of it, it was kind of like people were like, can I buy it? Can I see a demo of it?
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
Okay, well,
can you solve my problem?
We need to build the software now. And that took us to eventually becoming an AI company, which is can an algorithm read the contract for you and tell you what's inside
Huh.
it? And that was
Wow.
the impetus of like how we became an AI company.
Yeah. So super cool. So how does it actually work then? Because you're right, it is an image. You can't read the PDF. So does the AI go in and just break down the words and then figure it out, or what was the solution in the end? I'm curious.
Yeah, the solution was to eventually build many products, but the first product we built, the Analyze product, becomes your new cloud-based file repository, right? And so we
Okay.
replace the existing places people store documents, right? Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, SharePoint, OneDrive. We can replace those entirely, or we can sync with them if you can't organizationally kind of replace it. We can create an active sync. So get the files into the Analyze product. The first step is to identify which ones are scanned to PDFs. So we built
Got it.
technology to do
Got it.
it
Yeah.
programmatically, algorithmically, right? Figure out if a document is a scanned PDF, meaning it has no searchable text. Then the second thing we had to figure out was how to build a really great conversion pipeline to convert the images into text, right? Also known as OCR, optical character recognition, which is not a new thing. It's been out
Hmm.
for, I don't know, 50 years or whatever, and maybe
Right.
will continue to be worked on for another 150 years, long before I leave the earth. People will still be trying to get to 100% accuracy of OCR, and so we built a OCR pipeline, right, to continue
Yeah.
to digitize images into text. And
Right.
then
Right.
the algorithms, we built language processing algorithms, right? So we hired a bunch of super smart PhDs and data scientists and machine learning engineers and AWS experts and Rails engineers to essentially build a processing pipeline that
Hmm.
we could process a file and read them with algorithms and generate the answers, right?
Wow.
And that was kind of the early work that we did. So that's the experience for the customer. You can upload a file and 20 seconds later, it's like you have all the answers of like,
Yeah.
what's the effective date? Who are the parties that are named? Does the document have auto renewal or not? Or does it have termination for convenience? What's the state of governing law? And I
Yeah.
think we
Yeah.
do almost 150 pieces of metadata created out of the box without any training through our technology, which is like really special.
I'm a real number two pencil guy in the technological world. So, as if I was a 5-year old, what does it basically do? Does it recreate the document in a Word format, or literally creates a new document from that scanned PDF, or a new file? I guess, right? I mean, that's essentially what it
It's
is.
a
That it can read the
Yeah,
words.
the experience for the user is that you see the original file and you see all the answers of what's inside the file, right?
You
Structured
read it
data
just as if it
gets
was him. Yeah.
created.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then behind the scenes, we're reading the text, right? We're
Yeah.
reading the
Right.
plain text with algorithms, and the algorithms are trained to look for specific things, the words, right? We
Right. Right.
train on the word level, the sentence structure, right? Like
Yeah.
the sentence that contains the effective date, regardless of what the contract is or what type of contract is. This contract is effective between Vishal and Brandt as of
Yeah.
August 16th, 2022. Right,
Yeah.
that
Wow.
sentence
Super cool.
appears and we're looking for the effective date. So we've trained the algorithms to use the context of the words around the date to generate high confidence that this is the effective date. There could be 100 dates in the file named,
Right.
but only one
Right.
is the effective date because of that sentence, right? That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
theory. And so you look at an agreement inside LinkSquares, you see the original text of your agreement or the original PDF, you can view that too, and then to the left, you just see the answers of what's inside this
Yeah.
file. And then we
Right.
add on
Right.
reporting on top of that. Show me all my contracts that have an effective date in the last 6 months. Boom, here's a
August
report.
16th. Yeah. Super cool. Wow. That's great. Well, what a huge need that is. And are you focused only in the English language? Do you do multiple languages now? How does that play out on a global scale?
Yeah, we operate in many different countries outside the United
Yeah.
States also, but primarily focus our efforts today on English, right? We've built our
Yeah.
AI for the last 4 years on English translations. Now we do work with translation partners if people have docs in other languages, which are actually more
Right.
cumbersome for them than it probably is for us because they're not native speakers typically. So uh,
Sure.
paying for kind of conversion or helping them convert the files is something that we can do into English language. Maybe one day the AI will work in other languages, right? As we
Yeah.
continue to scale up here.
Yeah. God, super cool. Great. How many employees today and how many global customers?
Yeah, 700 customers,
Wow.
businesses, right? We
Yeah.
don't work with law firms. We only sell directly into in-house legal teams. We
Right.
have 300 and call it maybe 60 odd employees,
Yeah.
maybe half of which are in the Boston area, and then kind of the other half are remote. We operate in over 20 states in America too, so we're kind of like a hybrid type company.
Super cool. Got it. Great. Terrific. And been around about 7 years. Now, are you guys publicly traded?
One of
Hope to
our
be soon.
aspirations for the future. Yeah, it's still a private company.
Excellent. Cool. Well, tell me a little bit about how your leadership style has changed. I mean, that's a big organization, obviously bigger than the ones you've worked with in the past, or at least, since your DoD days. What is it that's changed with regards to how you work with others?
There's probably three kind of distinct phases, I think, of the journey that I've been on as a leader, as a people leader, right? The first was like the very, very early days where whatever job role that was required, it was a coin flip between Chris and I, who's going to do it, right? He did account
Who's got the odd
management and
project, right?
yeah, he did the account management and kind of new business sales when we were getting started, and I did the tech stuff because I had an engineering background and implementation and support. And then as we kind of hired folks, I always took a philosophy that my job as a CEO is to hire the best executive to work for
Yeah.
me, who then in
Right.
turn will hire the best people who want to work for them. Right. And the first person I prototyped that on was my CTO, Eric.
Hmm.
Right. He was my real first executive hire, and God knows how we've figured out the payroll to pay him, but we figured out a way to make it work. Work
Yeah.
with him at Backupify, super smart, best engineer I'd ever worked with, super super knowledgeable about everything, AWS and building code and testing it and all this stuff. And he was the one that I wanted to lead our tech organization, and so got Eric. Um, and that kind of like went from there, Brent. Like, uh, hired a product manager who then over the last 5 years was promoted up and promoted up and promoted up, and kind of became the de facto leader of the product organization, Andrew. And then I had hired a VP of sales, now my CRO, Steve, and we kind of kept that philosophy going. If I do a great job as the CEO picking a great leader, then they'll do a great job hiring people who are exceptional to work for them. And
Yeah.
then that kind of enters into the second phase where you don't have it all figured out. You have some executives, then you're trying to work with kind of people at kind of different levels, but the organization still feels pretty flat, right? In the
Yeah.
earliest days, it's very flat. Kind of
Right.
that middle phase, you're still pretty flat. Like, I'm in there at the end of the quarter with Chris, running the deal desk, helping make order forms, like getting terms of service negotiated. Like, I'm providing input to the product team and reviewing stuff. I mean, those were like 2018, 2019. Just working like a million hours. Like, just
Sure.
working a million hours cannot work enough time. There's just so much to do, especially as the traction is working, where we're
Right.
getting more and more customers. Then now we enter into kind of what I call like the third phase and probably the ending phase of kind of where we'll stay in steady state, which is um, the success of the company has got a lot less to do with me now. I'm just one person and I'm only good at
Right.
so many things. And I've done my job. I've hired 6 experts to work for me, right? Finance and chief finance officer and chief legal officer and chief marketing officer and chief revenue officer and product leader, product and engineering leader and technology. And I have it all kind of encompassed now. Now my job is mostly to get out of the way and
Yeah.
and remind people what's important, but really not talk about how to do it because I've done my job. I've hired 6 experts, and then they've hired 5 experts each, and then those five
Right.
experts have hired another 20 people underneath them, and now we kind of have this like wonderful kind of leadership team and then the kind of sub leadership team underneath them that actually makes the company happen. Right. And now
What
my
would you,
job is to think about the future. Right.
right? How would you describe the company culture? What do you think's a good descriptor around that, or what's most unique about LinkSquares?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been just awesome to see is just the success of the company and
Yeah.
how that's like a real motivator for people to kind of recognize that you're working at a place that's really kind of changing the way that people work and I think that
Well, and
then
people
kind
come
of
to you with this very specific problem that you can solve, and they've got to be so excited about that, right? And it kind of
totally
becomes a little bit like contagious with your staff
yeah
as well as with your clients as well, right? They get excited about it. I'm getting excited about it as you were explaining. I was like, wow, I've had that problem before, right? Where I've had a document, not necessarily a legal document, but I couldn't search it, couldn't figure out how to do it. And I'm amazed that AI and ML is able to help us do that. So is that you kind of find that with new customers too? Do you get referred to new customers? People see, from general counsel to general counsel. Has that happened a little bit with your customer base?
yeah absolutely the
Yeah.
referrals are always a joy. Even people changing roles in companies like they were general counsel at one place and then kind of that maybe company got acquired or their journey
Right.
ended there and they went to another
Yeah.
place and our record
They
is
bring you along.
three times like that's our record like person
That's
have bought
awesome.
LinkSquares three
Yeah.
different times. Two
Yeah.
people have bought LinkSquares three different times, three different companies, right?
Got three
Which is
different companies.
just
Yeah. We got to have that. It's just like one of those things you have to have. That is so cool. I love it.
the culture inside the company is also like fun. Like we're a fun bunch and
Yeah.
get the
Yeah.
company together for kind of three or four big events, regardless of where you live, and fly you into the Boston area, like for a kickoff in January and summer party in July, which we just had last month, and
Right.
holiday party in December, and kind of other events that go on inside the departments. But the culture is really centered around being team first and then customer driven. Right, we have all the success because we've been listening to what legal teams want. I'm not a legal person. I'm just like a software
You
engineer kind of
encountered the problem and said, "Hey, this needs to be fixed." I love it. I love it.
totally.
Well, I want to circle back to your recruiting because you talked about the importance of that. And, as an executive recruiter, it's always wonderful to get these insights. And a lot of folks that are listening to this are, thinking about maybe building their own corner office someday, or maybe, doing their own, interviewing. Maybe it's your company, but what is it that you look for? You hired those 6 great people. Is there a common thread, in the people that you've invested in and hired at LinkSquares?
Yeah, for me, especially when we're hiring executives, there's no room for people not to be experts.
Right.
And experts, like knowing that you're working with experts, is really evident in tenure, time that they've been doing the job. It's hard to find experts, right? And
Right.
I think
Right.
the other thing is it's hard to find experts that are the right fit for you. And what I mean by that is like, let's say
Mm.
you know someone who's like VP of sales at a company like that's super famous, like a Salesforce or a Workday, and they've
Right.
been selling like $1 million deals to like Fortune 1000 companies, right? But your go to market strategy is actually different. Yours is to maybe sell 30 or $40,000 deals into like the
Right.
middle market or the small
Yeah.
enterprise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you can find an expert. Is this person really good at sales? VP of sales at Salesforce? Of course they are, right? Like a regional vice president. Of course they're excellent at the job, but are they excellent for how you're going to go to market? Or are
Mm.
you trying to ram them into like a round hole and they're actually like a
Right.
square peg, right?
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's like really important is to find people who are familiar with your go to market strategy, especially
Yeah.
on the revenue
Yeah.
side because it won't work, right? Not every sales leader can sell at every price point or wants to, right?
That's right.
Despite their best intentions, right? Like, oh yeah, I can come in here, no problem. I can do $50,000 deals. But there's also the nuance of doing like higher velocity sales, right? Like doing
Sure.
a $50,000 deal in 50 days and the pipeline you generate is much different. I also think about like just the culture of you're joining early. It's going to be a lot of work. Are you at that kind of
Yeah.
right stage in
Yeah.
your life? I'm a dad now. I have two kids. I have a very young baby at home, and if I think about like 2017, 2018, 2019, like even when I had my first kid in October 2018, like my life is just way different now,
Right.
right? It's like my wife like doesn't love doing bedtime with two kids by herself every single
That's
night,
right.
even though
Nor should she. Yeah.
that's what she would be doing if I had started the company now versus like earlier in my journey. There's that stuff
Right.
too. Like, are you ready to take this journey and what we need, which is it's not going to be 9 to 5. It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot more than that.
Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
work all the time, right? So
Right.
then a lot of what I have as a kind of personal tip is that I hired people that I worked with.
Right.
And I had a
Sure.
real personal connection to every single
Yeah.
leader that I have. There's a bunch of backupifiers, right? Myself, my co-founder, my CTO, my CMO, my CRO, we all had like worked together, right?
Right. Right.
And that was like when we were up and comers, like when we were like director level or manager level, we had all kind of worked together. Then I kind of disappeared for a while, and then I got the band back together as their careers continued to
Right.
grow. So that's like an
Right.
insider tip. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you worked at a bunch of tech companies, then you've worked with people who are good candidates to be your future exec team as their careers have continued to flourish and grow. Uh,
Yeah.
and then there's like a
Super
unity
smart.
amongst there's a unity amongst us, right? Like we're
Yeah.
like a
And you've
family.
created that culture together too. That's important. And you kind of hire the new people against that culture too. Right.
Absolutely. And then defining
Yeah.
the values, right? We
Yeah.
sat
Yeah.
down and we defined like what are the four values of the company? Like team first,
Right.
customer driven, do what you say, right? And out of those out of those values, we now we now know that the most important one is really being all in, right? That's
Yeah.
our fourth
Right.
value is like
Right.
really being
Right.
all in. Like you're
Yeah.
either
Do whatever
all
it
in, and
takes.
all in is like a state of mind, right?
Yeah.
It's like all in is like a state of mind. Either you have it or you don't, right? Which is,
Right.
it's so
Right.
critical to be all in and work with people who are all in also, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
not all in, we're just not going to get there together. All the critics and all the thousands of people who told me that I'll fail, they'll actually be right.
Well, listen, we've got time for just a couple other questions, but I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite interview question? If so, what is it?
Yeah, there's 1,000 companies you can work for in the Boston area if we're interviewing locally.
Yeah.
What is it about LinkSquares that is the place you want to work next?
What's the most creative response you've heard to that?
Most recently, we hired a vice president, and they had listened to all of my podcasts. And it was wild. Like, I don't know, I've probably done maybe 20 of them. They had listened
Right.
to, God, maybe every single one. And he could like recall like specific things I told people on like a podcast just like this. And I was
Right.
just like blown away at the level of preparation.
Yeah.
Like he knew that my dad was an entrepreneur and I grew up in a family like that because I
Right.
said it on
Right.
a podcast like a while ago. And he was telling me about how like that story is like in your DNA, and that's why I know
Mm,
I want to work here, and I want to work
mm,
around you. This person particularly won't work for me; he'll work for one of my executives, but I will work
right.
closely with this person, and that was probably the most powerful emotional kind of response I could ever have.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of like kind of fluffy answers that come out of that, which really tells me kind of your level of preparedness to have a
Right.
conversation. If you need to have a conversation with me at this scale of company, like you better show up and have something interesting to tell me about the question of
Right.
why you want to join the company that I co-founded, right? We built this with our hands, right? We built this with our
Yeah.
love and effort, right? So yeah, I think that was the best one I had ever, and I expected it from this individual. Just polished, 25 years of experience, like came in, knew
Did
that
his
kind of
homework.
was the best. Yeah, was the
Yeah.
best way to do it. Hey,
Yeah.
that's a pro tip. Do your homework.
Do your homework. Great. Well, one last question, Vishal, and we ask this of all our guests. What kind of career and life advice you'd give someone who maybe is going to be wants to be a corner office someday, or more importantly, an entrepreneur like you that wants to found his own company or her own company? What would you tell them?
Yeah, there's two things I tell folks. The first is surround yourself with experts as much as you can, right? Experts for me were people who were marketing experts and revenue experts and B2B software
Or
strategists
SDG
and
for US and
product
Canada. We really
experts. And
appreciate you sharing your
I've
journey
learned
into the
so
corner
much
office.
just hearing
Thank you,
how
Brent.
they talk and think. And I got the opportunity to work at a whole bunch of companies that had these great experts that I could work around and orbit in their universe. I learned so much that way. You don't realize how much you're learning when you're watching the head of marketing and the head of sales have like a strategy conversation about, do we choose path A, B, or C? You're learning kind of how to even evaluate these paths. You can't read that anywhere. There's no like case study you can read to learn how to decide. And so much of the journey in the early days is with lots of uncertainty. Like you don't know, should I choose A, B, or C? They all seem okay, or they all have their pluses and minuses. So that's the first advice. Surround yourself with as many experts as you can, right? And learn from them. Learn everything you can from them. Be super selfish with learning for your own purposes, right? Go out of your way to be selfish about knowing what they know. And I think the right people will recognize that you want their guidance. And that's a great relationship. I still have relationship with those people that I learned from back in the day. Many of them invested in the company too.
And that's so important. I think a lot of folks don't appreciate that. They want to make that $1 million right out of the box. But if you go to a larger company, you're not just getting paid, you're getting paid to learn, right? And
Totally.
Part of that learning is connecting with those really smart people that built that company before you.
The other thing I'd say is like be the person that raises their hand. The hand raisers are the ones that take on more, right? More. I just want more. I'll do that project, even though it's hard or it's uncertain or no one wants to do it. Be that person that raises your hand. Be the odd projects guy like me, or
right.
That's what my nickname was, right? I'm the odd projects guy. But I built a career off odd projects. Being CEO is no different. You're solving all these odd projects all the time.
That's right.
And then if you want to be CEO, you have to learn about how businesses work, right? How marketing works at some level, right? Not say spend a career in marketing, but you've got to understand like marketing and sales and developing software and
all
supporting it and implementation and finance and financial modeling. And some people you'll hire like piece part players or contractors or fractional people that can come and give you advice, but you have to know it because eventually you could end up like me with hundreds of employees, and the strategy really depends on you knowing what to do, right? And that's on you as the leader. And then the other advice I give people is don't give up. Everything that's worth doing in life that's hard, don't give up. And we didn't give up. That's the whole LinkSquares story. We just didn't give up.
Yeah, love it. Well, Vishal Sunak, CEO and co-founder of LinkSquares, thank you so very much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.